Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braj Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braj Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Shri Govinda Mai Prashashi Ki Jai Shri Tulsinath Maharaj Ki Jai Shri Giri Thai Lal Ki Jai Shri Nasingadev Bhagwan Ki Jai Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Really? To start the same one, or do we have another one? Or I can just read from another book, our family business or something. Maybe we'll just leave that out. Reading from Our Family Business, chapter entitled Faith in God and Strength of Mind. Lord Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that a devotee who fully surrenders unto him is no longer liable to suffer the reactions of his previous karma. However, because in his mind a devotee may still maintain the remnants of his previous sinful mentality, the Lord removes the last vestiges of the enjoying spirit by giving his devotee punishments that may sometimes resemble sinful reactions. The purpose of the entire creation of God is to rectify the living entity's tendency to enjoy without the Lord, and therefore the particular punishment given for a sinful activity is specifically designed to curtail the mentality that produced the activity. Although a devotee has surrendered to the Lord's devotional service until he is completely perfect in Krishna consciousness, he may maintain a slight inclination to enjoy the false happiness of this world. The Lord therefore creates a particular situation to eradicate this remaining enjoying spirit. This unhappiness suffered by a sincere devotee is not technically a karmic reaction. It is rather the Lord's special mercy for including his devotees to completely let go of the material world and return home back to Godhead. 500 years ago in Navadvip, Bengal, even Lord Chaitanya and his followers faced adversity as they inaugurated the Lord's Sankirtan movement. In fact, as soon as Mahaprabhu took the congregational chanting out of Srivas Thakur's house home for the first time and onto the streets, someone called the police. Constables came, broke the mridangas, and ordered the devotees to stop chanting. In the same way, since Srila Prabhupada had launched ISKCON in 1966, his chanting and book distribution parties have been harassed by members of the public. In the 1970s, most of ISKCON's book distributors were in their teens or early 20s. On seeing them selling books in city streets or in airports, people frequently heckled them, calling out things like, "Get a job," or of course no devotee seeks out such encounters. Srila Prabhupada taught us to go out of our way to be perfect gentlemen and gentlewomen while presenting Krishna consciousness. Still, harsh encounters come our way, and devotees who are willing to meet them learn to tolerate them as Krishna's mercy and deal with them appropriately. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I actually don't have my Adi Leela here. Have you got an iPad? Yeah. It's Adi Leela. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So, Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
So reading from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila chapter 6, text 26. So I'll just go through the 26 and 27 myself, and then we can do 28 together. Mahavishnu Ramsha Advaita Gunadhama Ishwarya Vedatenya Advaita Purna Nama. Sri Advaita, who is a reservoir of virtues, is the main limb of Mahavishnu. His full name is Advaita, for he is identical in all respects with that Lord. 27. Purve Yaichi Kaila Sarva Vishvera Srijana Avatari Kaila Ebi Bhakti Pravartana. As he had formerly created all the universes, now he descended to introduce the path of bhakti. Text 28. Okay. Jiva Nistarila Krishna Bhakti Karidhana Gita Bhagavati Kaila Bhakti Ravyakana
Gita Bhagavati Kaila Bhakti Ravyakana
Jiva Nistarila Krishna Bhakti Karidhana Gita Bhagavati Kaila Bhakti Ravyakana Jiva Nistarila Krishna Bhakti Karidhana Gita Bhagavati Kaila Bhakti Ravyakana
Jivanistarila Krishna Bhakti Karidhana
Jivanistarila Krishna Bhakti Karidhana
Gita Bhagavati Kaila Bhakti Ravyakana
Gita Bhagavati Kaila Bhakti Ravyakana
Jivanistarila Krishna Bhakti Karidhana
Jiva Nistarila Krishna Bhakti Karidhana
Gita Bhagavati Kaila Bhakti Ravyakana
Gita Bhagavati Kaila Bhakti Ravyakana
Jivanistarila Krishna Bhakti Karidhana
Jiva Nistarila Krishna Bhakti Karidhana
Gita Bhagavati Kaila Bhakti Ravyakana
Gita Bhagavati Kaila Bhakti Ravyakana
Jivanistarila Krishna Bhakti Karidhana
Jiva Nistarila Krishna Bhakti Karidhana
Gita Bhagavati Kaila Bhakti Ravyakana
Gita Bhagavate Kaila Bhakti Ravyakana. Jivanishtarila Krishna Bhakti Karidana. Gita Bhagavate Kaila Bhakti Ravyakana. Ladies.
Jivanishtarila Krishna Bhakti Karidana.
Jivanishtarila Krishna Bhakti Karidana.
Gita Bhagavate Kaila Bhakti Ravyakana.
Jiva, the living entities. Nishtarila, delivered. Krishna Bhakti, devotional service to Lord Krishna. Kari, making. Dana, gift. Gita Bhagavate, in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Kaila, performed. Bhakti Ravyakana, explanation of devotional service. Translation. He delivered all living beings by offering the gift of Krishna Bhakti. He explained the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam in the light of devotional service. Please repeat. He delivered all living beings by offering the gift of Krishna Bhakti. He explained the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam in the light of devotional service. Purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Although Sri Advaita Prabhu is an incarnation of Vishnu, for the welfare of the conditioned souls, he manifested himself as a servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And throughout all his activities, he showed himself to be an eternal servitor. Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda also manifested the same principle, although they also belonged to the category of Vishnu. If Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, and Advaita Prabhu had exhibited their all-powerful Vishnu potencies within this material world, people would have become greater impersonalists, monists, and self-worshippers than they had already become under the spell of this age. Therefore, the personality of Godhead and its different incarnations and forms played the parts of devotees to instruct the conditioned souls how to approach the transcendental stage of devotional service. Advaita Acharya especially intended to teach the conditioned souls about devotional service. The word Acharya means teacher. The special function of such a teacher is to make people Krishna conscious. A bona fide teacher following in the footsteps of Advaita Acharya has no other business than to spread the principles of Krishna consciousness all over the world. The real qualification of an Acharya is that he presents himself as a servant of the Supreme. Such a bona fide Acharya can never support the demoniac activities of atheistic men who present themselves as God. It is the main business of an Acharya to defy such impostors posing as God before the innocent public. Om Jnanatimrandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmalitanyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadammayam Dadati Swapadantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So today is a very auspicious day. It's described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that Advaita Acharya is Mangala, which means auspicious, and all his activities are auspicious. So hearing about him is all auspicious. So here in this verse is described that he delivered all living beings by offering the gift of Krishna Bhakti. He explained the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam in the light of devotional service. So Advaita Acharya is one of the members of the Panch Tattva. We see the Panch Tattva is Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, Sri Advaita. So these are all in the Vishnu category. And Srivas Thakur and Gadadhar Pandit is Shakti Tattva, and Srivas Thakur is pure devotee. So we can see that all three, Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, and Advaita Acharya, although they're the Supreme Lord in the Vishnu category, they came and they showed the people of the world how to be a devotee. So they practiced being devotee themselves, although they're in such a supreme position. They came down to show us how to develop devotional service to Krishna. So Advaita Acharya is actually an incarnation. He's a combined incarnation of Mahavishnu and Sadashiva. So Mahavishnu is in the picture at the back. We see Mahavishnu is lying in the causal ocean, and all the universes are coming out from the pores of his body. So he's in such a he's a supreme lord of all the universes, all the planets, and he's come down in a form to show us how to serve him, to serve God. So he appeared around 50 years before Lord Chaitanya's advent. So and he was born of the son of Kubera Acharya and Nabadevi. And most of his adult life, he lived in Shantipur, although they say he had a house in Navadvip as well. But most of the time he was in Shantipur. And he had two wives, and they were Sita Thakurani and Sri Devi, and they were both expansions of Yoga Maya. And altogether he had 6 sons. And at that time in Navadvip, around the world, all throughout the world, there was this, people were devoid of any devotion to Krishna. And the Advaita Acharya and his associates like Srivas Thakur, they were seeing the degradation of this age, and it was really giving them a lot of pain, but people were not interested in any type of devotional service to God. They were mainly interested in materialistic pursuits, and they were just becoming more and more engrossed in just family life and pursuing scholarly activities. So Advaita Acharya became overwhelmed with compassion, and he began to teach Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, explaining that the purpose of the scriptures was to engage in devotional service to Krishna. But still, it was very difficult because most people were not interested. And during that time, Madhavendra Puri, he was going to Orissa. He was actually going to Jagannath Puri because Gopal in his dream had asked him to get chandan, sandalwood. So on his way to Puri, he stopped off in Shantipur, and that's where he met Advaita Acharya Prabhu. And Advaita Acharya Prabhu, he was convinced by Madhavendra Puri's ecstatic love of God that he wanted to accept him as his spiritual master. So Madhavendra Puri became the spiritual master of Advaita Acharya. And so we can see that although Advaita Acharya is Mahavishnu himself, he took initiation to show us how to accept a spiritual master, that no matter how elevated we may be, we always have to accept a spiritual master. And so Ishvara Puri is also a disciple of Madhavendra Puri. So that makes Advaita Acharya and Ishvara Puri are like God brothers. And Ishvara Puri is the spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya. So Advaita Acharya was observing how sinful the people were in this age of Kali. And it reached a disturbing limit. And people in the world were not interested in devotional service. They were only interested in material enjoyment. So he thought that even if the Lord came as a partial incarnation, it wouldn't be sufficient to completely bring about welfare of the people of the world and the earth and the state. So he thought that the world would only benefit if the Supreme Lord himself descended to the earth. So he began to worship Krishna in the form of the Shalagram Shila. And he would offer Ganges water and tulsi leaves. And he would shout, he would actually roar Lord Chaitanya, he would roar for Lord Krishna to come. And he would plead for the Lord to descend. And it said that the Lord actually came because of the roaring of Advaita Acharya, his roars. And actually, in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, it describes that Lord Chaitanya would remind Advaita Acharya about this, and he would say, I was lying in the ocean of milk, and Nara's loud roars woke me up and caused me to descend. So Lord Chaitanya would call Advaita Acharya Nara out of affection. So he would say, Nara, I was lying in the ocean of milk, and your roars that called me and woke me up, and that's why I came. So that's one of the reasons that Lord Chaitanya came. There's other reasons, but that's one of the reasons that Lord Chaitanya came, to help spread the devotional service of the Lord. And there's so many different pastimes of Advaita Acharya, and I'm just going to say a few of them. So before Lord Chaitanya, before the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, Advaita Acharya would meet Haridas Thakur. So Haridas Thakur was a great devotee, great Vaishnava, but because he was born in a Muslim family, then he wasn't accepted by the smarter Brahmins at that time. And on the Shraddha ceremony, where offerings of foodstuffs gets offered to the ancestors, then usually you feed the Brahmins to get the blessings. So Advaita Acharya would give the honor of the plate of prasad to Haridas Thakur. And Haridas Thakur would be like, no, it's, I'm not a Brahmin, But Advaita Acharya would say, feeding you is like feeding millions of Brahmanas because you're a great Vaishnava. So he wouldn't accept the caste system at that time, the smarta Brahmins way of thinking, and he would go against that and feed Haridas Thakur. And there's a nice story where when Lord Chaitanya wanted Advaita Acharya to come, he called for Advaita Acharya to come meet him in Navadvip. And Advaita Acharya wanted to test Lord Chaitanya. So he hid, and instead of going straight to Lord Chaitanya, he hid in Nandanacharya's house. And so Lord Chaitanya, being omniscient, he could understand this. So he was in Srivas Thakur's house, and he sent Srivas Thakur's brother Ramai to go and get Advaita Acharya from Nandanacharya's house. And then Advaita Acharya understood that Lord Chaitanya is divine, that he understands his mind. So then when he went to Srivas Thakur's house, where Lord Chaitanya was staying, then he offered Lord Chaitanya worship with Ganges water, with tulsi leaves, with the whole arti. And he was so happy that the Lord was showing his pastimes. He was revealing his pastimes now. And another time, Lord Chaitanya asked Advaita Acharya, what do you want, Advaita Acharya? And Advaita Acharya says, I want to see that form that you showed Arjuna, that universal form. I want to see that form of yours. So then Lord Chaitanya showed his universal form to Advaita Acharya. And nobody else seen it. But Lord Nityananda wanted to see it too, so he came running to see it. But so the Lord showed his universal form to Advaita Acharya. And Lord Chaitanya, Advaita Acharya always wanted to be considered a servant of Lord Chaitanya. He never wanted, because Lord Chaitanya would always offer respects, because Advaita Acharya was like 50 years his elder, and he was a great Acharya as well. So Lord Chaitanya would always offer him respect and worship. And but Advaita Acharya never liked that. He wanted to be accepted as a servant of Lord Chaitanya. So Lord Chaitanya, one time, Advaita Acharya, he wanted to be chastised by Lord Chaitanya so he would be accepted as a servant, because you don't generally chastise an elder. Usually chastise somebody who's your junior, So he wanted Lord Chaitanya to accept him as his junior. So Advaita Acharya went to the extent of preaching Mayavad philosophy to be chastised by Lord Chaitanya, so then he would be accepted as a servant. So this was the extent to what he wanted, to be accepted as a servant. And Lord Chaitanya, there was one time, when Lord Chaitanya had taken sannyas, then Lord Chaitanya was in ecstasy, so he became bewildered, and Lord Nityananda, he knew that he wanted to go to Vrindavan, but he wanted to trick Lord Chaitanya, so he tried to get a few cowherd boys to tell him the direction, that this is the way to the Yamuna. So Lord Chaitanya came, which actually was the Ganges, but Lord Chaitanya thought it was a Yamuna. And then he saw Advaita Acharya in a boat, and he says, what are you doing here, Advaita Acharya, And then he realized this was Shantipur, it wasn't actually at Vrindavan. So Advaita Acharya took him in the boat and then took him to Shantipur, to his house, to feed him. And Advaita Acharya had prepared lots of preparations, a big feast. And so he invited Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda to take prasad. And Lord Chaitanya says, this is far too many preparations that I can't manage to eat all this, you know. And Nityananda Prabhu said, you know, I've been fasting for 3 days and it looks like I'm going to have to fast again because this is just a morsel for me, you know. So then Advaita Acharya became, this loving exchanges between Advaita Acharya and Lord Nityananda are very difficult to understand because it sounds like they're insulting each other, but actually it's a loving exchange. They have so much love for each other that they actually relish this exchange of these words. So Advaita Acharya was saying, you know, you're a reject Paramahamsa. Nobody knows your whereabouts, where your family is from, who you are, and you know you're eating so much, and you're saying it's just a morsel. Then Lord Nityananda would say something, and then he'd throw some of the prasadam, and one of the grains of rice hit hit Advaita Acharya Prabhu, and Advaita Acharya started dancing in ecstasy, you know. So it was just all these little, you know, joking words and loving exchanges between Lord Nityananda and Advaita Acharya are so very, very unique, and we cannot understand this, you know, this loving exchange that they have. Externally, it looks like they're insulting, but they're having they're relishing that love between them. So also, there was also another pastime where, because Lord Chaitanya never wanted to be, you know, glorified. He always wanted everyone to chant Krishna's name. And then one time, Advaita Acharya decided, and Srivas Thakur decided, no, we're just going to chant Lord Chaitanya's name. Because he's the one who's given us so much. He's so merciful. So we're just going to chant Lord Chaitanya's name. So they went with all the devotees to Lord Chaitanya's house, and Lord Chaitanya, they were all chanting Gauranga, you know. And then Lord Chaitanya said, you know, what is all this? Srivas Thakur, what is all this? And Srivas Thakur started to put his hand in front of his face. And Lord Chaitanya said, what are you doing? He says, I have no power to cover the sun with my hand. In the same way, you have no power to not reveal yourself. Like, no, you haven't the power to conceal yourself. You know, you're the Supreme Lord. So in that way, they were all chanting Lord Chaitanya's name, and Lord Chaitanya was pleased. There's so many other pastimes. Can you remember any?
Well, the pastime you said in the one that my favorite is the one there's a loving exchange going on all the time between him and Lord Nityananda, and although it seemed like they were insulting each other, like Chaitanya Bhagavat explains that they were actually glorifying each other, although it seemed like it was, but actually they had so much love for each other, and it's described that the interaction of cross and insulting that was going on was delicious, and all the devotees were smiling and relishing it. Lord Chaitanya was relishing it as well, how they were poking fun at each other, but how that was actually glorifying them. And it's interesting how, because generally when we with pastimes with Lord Chaitanya, all his pastimes are with perfected either Vishnu Tattva, Shakti Tattva, or perfected Jiva Tattva. So we get a glimpse into what it must be like to interact and associate with personalities on the platform of perfection. So we get a glimpse of that, and then we can also try to reflect that in our relational skills as well. That we have everything we do is with so much respect and so much love that people don't take it the wrong way. They always understand that we're saying that, but not in a nasty, bad way, but in a way which is just to stimulate more affection between each other. So that's a wonderful resource that we have access to through Chaitanya Charitamrita and Chaitanya Bhagavan and Lord Chaitanya's pastimes that are only happened just a few hundred years ago.
Yeah, and you can see that although they're so exalted and, you know,
Even understand that the personality who's maintaining all the universes, who's creating all the universes from the pores of his body, has come down as Advaita Acharya. It's inconceivable that somebody so great has come to give us devotional service. And that was the main mission of Advaita Acharya. He wanted to preach the message of Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, as it says in this verse. And that's the reason he asked Lord Chaitanya to come. He asked Krishna to come, is to help, because Prabhupada explains that these the Goshtya Nandi is full of compassion and he wants to help others, whereas the Bhajana Nandi, he's self-satisfied, he's doing his duty and he's quite happy to be Krishna conscious himself. But we see Lord Chaitanya's associates, they had the mood of sharing Krishna consciousness with others. They didn't just want to keep it to themselves, and it's described that they broke open the storehouse of love of Godhead. So they broke open the storehouse of love of Godhead, and they wanted to give everybody this mercy. They didn't want to hold back. And they gave this mercy indiscriminately. Whether you were qualified or not qualified, they were giving it to everyone and anyone. And this was actually their causeless mercy, that without the Panch Tattva, we can't really develop pure devotional service. Without their mercy, it's not really possible. And Lord Chaitanya has so much love for Advaita Acharya, and Advaita Acharya had so much love for Lord Chaitanya, that Lord Chaitanya would say that even if, you know, somebody worships me for millions of years or forever, and if they don't accept you, then I will not accept them. And Advaita Acharya said the same, that even although they may be my son or my disciple, if they don't accept you as my Lord, then I won't accept them. I reject them. So this was that they would only accept somebody if somebody would accept either Advaita Acharya or Lord Nityananda. They wouldn't accept each other. They wouldn't accept that person unless they accepted both. So we can't just accept Lord Chaitanya and not accept Advaita Acharya. And we can't just accept Advaita Acharya and not accept Lord Chaitanya. We have to accept both. Otherwise, they won't accept us. So that's the unique position of the Panch Tattva, that they're so, their mercy is actually the necessity. We need their mercy to actually understand Radha and Krishna. We can't go to Radha and Krishna without the mercy of the Panch Tattva. It's not possible. We can maybe externally try to do it, but it won't change our heart. We won't be able to understand these very deep subject matters. And Lord Chaitanya wanted to show that the purpose, the way to devotional service is by becoming a servant of Krishna. It's not by trying to be God, like in this verse it's described in the purport, that already the Lord knew that in this age people were impersonalists, Mayavadis, they wanted to be God already. So if they came as a Supreme Lord, then people would imitate them and also want to be God. So that's why they came as devotees, so that they could show us how to become servants of God, so that we can actually learn what is devotional service, how to become a devotee of God. So that's the unique position of the Panch Tattva, that they're showing us by their own example how to be a devotee, how to render devotional service, how to have loving exchanges with devotees. If you read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the whole mood is based on loving exchanges with devotees, relationships with devotees, how to cultivate relationships. And throughout the Chaitanya Bhagavat, there's a main theme that Lord Chaitanya is showing that he would reject those who were offensive to his devotees. Although he's the most merciful incarnation, there's so many instances where he shows that he wouldn't accept those personalities who offended his devotees. So there's a nice example where, although it wasn't really an offense, but Lord Chaitanya's mother, Sachi, she was thinking that, her son Vishvarup already had taken sannyas, and now Lord Chaitanya was spending a lot of time with Advaita Acharya, and she was afraid that Advaita Acharya would also make him more and more detached from the world, and then Lord Chaitanya would also take sannyas. So she was really afraid of this. And out of motherly affection, she didn't want Lord Chaitanya to leave home. So in her mind, she didn't actually say it verbally, but in her mind, she was thinking, because of Advaita Acharya, my son Vishvarup took sannyas, and now he's also preaching to my son Lord Nimai. So she was actually just thinking that. And Lord Chaitanya picked it up. So he didn't give her, he was giving love of God to everybody, and the devotees were saying, please give Krishna prema to Mother Sachi. She's your mother. She's you took birth from her womb. If anybody should have it, she should have it. And Lord Chaitanya said, no, I won't give Krishna prema to Mother Sachi. And they're saying, why? And he said, because she's offended Advaita Acharya by her thoughts. And so Advaita Acharya says, no, she's a universal mother. She's not offended me. And so he fainted in ecstasy. And at that time, Mother Sachi took the opportunity and took some dust from Lord Advaita Acharya's feet. And then she got free from that offense. And then Lord Chaitanya said, the whole thing was solved, and Lord Chaitanya gave her Krishna prema. So we can see that even Lord Chaitanya was not prepared to give Krishna prema even to his own mother, who had pure love for him because she had offended Advaita Acharya. So this is, these are the pastimes to show us that how careful we have to be in dealing with devotees. And there's so many other pastimes like that, that we have to understand. The Chaitanya Bhagavata it's got so many different pastimes to show us what to do and what not to do in devotional service. And so, does anybody else want to share any pastimes of Advaita Acharya? Can you remember any, Jap? No. Vrinda? And there's another, yeah.
So how can do a reading of the Bhagavad and you have access to more knowledge about Advaita Acharya and his pastimes? Are there any other books, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Bhagavad, any other ones which are nice to read to find out more about Advaita Acharya?
I've not read any other books like this. I mean, we did it, but I've not actually come across.
But Chaitanya Charitamrita is the main book that we should study with the pastimes of the Lord, because Chaitanya Bhagavata is like the 10th canto of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Basically, it's like Vyasadeva wrote, all the whole Bhagavatam, but the 10th canto has all the most confidential pastimes. And similarly, it's described that Veda Vyas came as Vrindavan Das Thakur, and he wrote the Chaitanya Bhagavat, which is like the pastimes of, the Lord. So they're more confidential pastimes. So we shouldn't just go straight to the Chaitanya Bhagavat. We should actually go through the Chaitanya Charitamrita and understand the proper philosophy and Siddhanta, the tattva of the Panch Tattva, what is the different, the understanding of the Lord first before we go and enter into his confidential pastimes. So, but otherwise we'll misunderstand. We'll misunderstand these pastimes, just like we misunderstand the 10th canto.
Before we approach Brother, why is it that we should read the Srimad Bhagavatam before we read the Chaitanya Charitamrita? Lord Chaitanya is more approachable when we were to read the Chaitanya Charitamrita first.
Because the system of study is we try to understand Krishna's words first, that's the Bhagavad Gita. Then we try to understand his activity.
which is the Bhagavatam. And then we try to understand his mind, which is Chaitanya Charitamrita. So that's the order we're supposed to go in. Otherwise, we'll misunderstand. We'll not understand the significance or appreciate the Chaitanya Charitamrita, because this is actually deeper. It's Lord Chaitanya's ecstatic feelings of separation, you know. So we're never going to understand such deep subject matter unless we have the basics, you know. We have to understand who Krishna is, his incarnations, and then we can go and understand the more confidential reasons for his appearance as Lord Chaitanya and why, you know, because Lord Chaitanya is Radha and Krishna combined, so it's very confidential subject matter. It's not just to be discussed, you know, with that proper understanding. Pardon.
Could you maybe say some more about that Lord Chaitanya coming in the group exhibiting externally sort of dressed as devotees and trying to show that, but then there's all these little glimpses, you know, used in the past time Lord Chaitanya manifests universal form, or how Advaita wants to see the servant Lord Chaitanya, externally he's older. So like, yeah, could you elaborate more on that sort of like the tension or the balance between like externally they're playing a role, but then they're also then aware of their true position.
Yeah, there's one pastime where
The Lord, there's a pastime where Lord Chaitanya reveals his different incarnations, different relationship with different devotees, and he does it for like 24 hours or something. It's called. I can't remember, but Mahaprakash Leela. So he manifests. He starts showing his different incarnation forms to different devotees that have different relationships with him. So he calls Murari Gupta, and he manifests himself as Lord Ram, and he could see Sita Devi and Hanuman, and he could see himself as Hanuman, Murari Gupta as Hanuman. See, so he manifested the form of Lord Ram to Murari Gupta to show him that he's non-different from Lord Ram. And then there's the pastime where he shows his six-armed form, this form of Sadguj, to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya to show that he's non-different from Lord Ram and Lord Krishna. So there's many places where Lord Chaitanya shows his divinity to certain personalities to show that he is the Supreme Lord. And so we can understand that although he's presenting himself as a devotee, he's actually the Supreme Lord. So there's like glimpses where he shows himself to different devotees. So we can understand from that his divinity. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to understand it. And so there's different places where it's like Krishna sometimes showed his divinity, but sometimes he just played like a little boy, you know. So Lord Chaitanya would also show different kind of pastimes where he would show his divinity to certain personalities, so we could understand that he's the Supreme Lord. And is that okay? Is there any other questions or comments?
Lord Chaitanya didn't like to be because he said he was in the devotee, wasn't in the Supreme Lord, so that would have interfered with that rasa. And also he foresaw that in the future there would be so many bogus incarnations that would come along and cheapen the whole thing. So he wanted to just present the process of devotional service and clearly define, you know, how a bona fide devotee behaves, you know, and he doesn't like to be glorified, doesn't like to be considered worshipped as God. He just wants to serve and spread Krishna consciousness.
yeah. So
Although it's like Prabhupada says that, like when a teacher wants to teach a child how to write, then he'll go with the child and he'll hold the pen and he'll also write like a child, to show the child how to write. So in the same way, the Lord, although he is the supreme personality of God, and he comes down as a devotee to teach us how to be a devotee, because who else is going to show us how to be a devotee like the Lord? He can actually show us better than anybody else because he's supreme. So he's showing us in the form of the highest devotee because he's in the mood of Srimati Radharani. So he came in that mood to show us the greatest devotee, what her mood is to serve the Lord. So, of course, we can't imitate Lord Chaitanya's ecstasies, because they're on the highest level of Mahabhav. But we can understand the mood is to be a servant of a servant of a servant. This was Lord Chaitanya's mood, was to how to develop the mood of being a servant of the servant of the servant. So we have to learn that mood, how to be a servant of the Lord and his devotees. And so they showed that by their own examples. The whole Panchatattva showed this.
And Lord Chaitanya also came to teach us about Vipalamma, to serve in separation as well. With saying that we've seen Krishna, and that's explained in the Sankalpa Kamudi, toward the end of the Shiva Ramanuja is compiled, that this longing, you feel like you belong somewhere and you're longing to be back there. So it's like now that you've left home. If you have amnesia, you don't really long to be home because you don't know how to get away from home. You think you're in home. So as the separation is to become stimulated, then you start realizing that you're away and you feel like you're alone away. And so you're feeling this yearning, to go back.
Another question by Hare Krishna. Are only initiates called devotees?
Well, what Chaitanya said is, even if someone just chants Hare Krishna once, they should be considered like a devotee. So there's different levels of devotees. Somebody who's chanting Hare Krishna is considered a devotee, but we offer our respects to them within our mind. Somebody who's actually initiated, we offer obeisances to them. This is described in Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Instruction, how we deal with different types of devotees. And somebody who is, very advanced in devotional service, and we offer we basically accept them as our spiritual master, and either Shiksha or Diksha Guru, and we reveal our heart and mind to them and accept their directions. So, even if one's not initiated, if one is chanting Hare Krishna, one is considered a devotee of a type within Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Instruction. So.
Krishna,
Is there any other questions? Oh. Okay. If there's no more questions, then I can.
I don't know if you know anything about it, but you mentioned that Advaita had 2 wives and 6 sons. Advaita fell out of alignment with what he wanted them to do, and they were considered useless, weren't they? And some sons followed nicely. So was that a mixture of the sons from each particular wife, or was one lot from one wife?
Sorry. Okay. Thank you for attending. Sorry, I was not well prepared for the class today, but tried best. ISKCON Govinda ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai, Advaita Acharya Prabhu ki jai, Gaur Premanandi. Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki.
Sure.